Kelly, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Kelly.
Right? I know. I think this is like the third or fourth episode in a very short span of time that I've had another Kelly on. So this is fun. One of them was a man, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Um, so we're here to talk today about post-traumatic pumping disorder, and I found you on Instagram through a post that you had put out about this topic, and I had to have you come on and talk about this with me because this is something very, very real that parents experience. And until recently, even I didn't really have the words to describe what it is that these parents are experiencing. So can you tell us a little bit about post-traumatic pumping disorder and what it is and what it means to you?
Yeah. So I actually heard that term about 5 years ago from Amanda Ogden, which is another IBCLC here in the Denver area. And, what I see is that these women um, have, when you're breastfeeding your baby, with baby number one, you have a lot of oxytocin flowing, even if things are difficult, like, all of that oxytocin, doesn't, makes it nice. It, makes breastfeeding your baby nice.
Yeah.
Even if everything isn't going super well, you don't have that any trauma associated with it um, but what I see is women that end up pumping a lot. Now, whether that pumping is just back to work pumping and they have to like pump because they're back to work for a long time and, they're pumping for a long time, or they're pumping, because something is going wrong. The baby isn't latching, or they have low supply. And so baby's latching plus they're pumping or something like that. It be, in their heads, it becomes this vicious, like, oh, it's something I have to do. And it's, it usually doesn't happen what we see with these, the people who decide from the beginning, I want to be exclusive pumper because this is what I want to do, but those that end up having to do it, you know, they hold something in their brain so that the next time around, it's like they don't even want to look at a pump, and they are getting out breastfeeding stuff while they're pregnant, and they get a reaction, a physical reaction when they see their pump, and want to do everything they can to not pump.
Yeah. And it's really difficult to experience that and be a second time parent and have these really negative associations. And it truly is a negative association, like psychologically. And we were supporting a parent recently who was going through this right at the same time that I actually had seen your post. And she had an experience where she was really struggling with breastfeeding her first baby. She ended up exclusively pumping and bottle feeding and having a really terrible time with it. Ended up with vasospasms because she was using a pump that didn't fit her, right? So she is in excruciating pain. Before with her previous experience, and now she has a new baby and we are having complications, and so she's like, I can't do this, like I can't go down this road again, like really stressed out. She did end up using the pump, but she was so stressed out using the pump that the pump itself wasn't working. The milk was there, but she had all that stress in her body that it was holding back her letdowns, and the pump just wasn't working for her. And then she started having all these really negative emotions coming up again, and it was this really awful experience. And so we ended up having to go back and like dropping all of the breastfeeding support and lactation management that we were doing and focusing just on her and like getting her past these like mental blocks and helping her relax and working on psychological tricks just to break down that barrier of stress reaction she was having to this experience of needing to pump. And it was not easy for her. And we see it so often, like you said, with working parents, like that dreaded task.
Yeah, I mean, what you saw, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that bad. for their first experience.
That
It
was
can be just
definitely
like,
an extreme example.
yeah, no, I mean, totally. I mean, like she had pain from the pump,
Yeah.
which, yeah, of course she's going to have that reaction. I mean, it's terrible, but, I mean, but we see the same thing in women that are pumping just because they're back to work,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Oh yeah,
Uh, and I think there's so many reasons for that. It's a lot of work.
it is a lot of work.
Pumping is a lot of work. And you don't have that, um, the benefits of, I mean, yeah, you get a little oxytocin flowing when you're doing it. You have to. And we're told, like, moms are told, oh, look at your baby's picture or video. So you have a, let down, So there is a little bit of oxytocin flowing, but for the most part, you're not. You're
Right.
not having that closeness. You're not having that skin to skin. We're just getting the milk out, which is wonderful. And of course, moms want to do it because they need to work and they want to have the breast milk for their babies. But then there's so many moms too that I see that, like, they didn't even realize they were having such negative feelings toward it until baby 2 or until baby 3, whichever one was the subsequent baby, and I think that the ones that have a traumatic experience like what you saw, or even like the triple feeders, or the ones that triple fed for,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't talk about triple feeding is not supposed to be a long-term solution.
For triple feeding, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's when you're feeding your baby at the breast, pumping afterwards, and then also giving your baby a bottle on top of that. So you're literally doing 3 different parts all together just for one single feeding, and it is draining and it takes forever. And you're literally doing that all day.
Yeah, I mean, it takes forever because often at times you're, pumping for at least 20 minutes, breastfeeding for at least 20 minutes, bottle feeding for, 10, 20 minutes, by the time you get it all in there or get whatever was in the pump in there. Or sometimes where they're feeding like what came from the pump plus formula or donor, and they don't want to mix it. So altogether, that process usually takes at least an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the baby's feeding every 2.5, 3 hours, you don't have hardly any time in between. And
No,
so that's why it is not a long-term solution.
it's
It
not.
is a short-term solution. And oftentimes, parents get sent home from doctor's offices or the hospital or whatever, triple feeding, with no plan to end it. And so they end up long-term triple feeding. And then they get this post-traumatic pumping disorder, or, where I've actually, so what prompted me to make that post is I had a client, it was a prenatal client who came to me saying, like, I can't even look at my pump. I know that I'm going to have low supply. I don't know what to do,
Oh,
you know? So
yeah.
she has IGT, she wants to breastfeed, but she just can't look at her pump. And just like there aren't a lot of good physical solutions. We want to make sure that the baby can elicit as much milk as possible. We have a plan to do, very short term pumping, get her to a place of where she is going to be making the most milk possible, and, starting supplements before birth so that we can get the most milk possible. And then be okay with where we're at,
Yeah.
and she likes that plan a lot better, where she has like a set time limit where she's not going to pump at all beyond 1 month.
Yeah.
And she's home with she's going to be home with her kids, so that's also another story.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. You
which
know,
not all of them can do.
right. Well, what I find particularly distressing just on the lactation management end is I very frequently, all too frequently, see clients who are distressed because they're trying to increase their milk production and pumping and doing all these things, and nobody bothered to inform them that they had IGT. which is, for anybody that doesn't know, insufficient glandular tissue, which can lead to low milk supply. And so, it's
Isn't
hard
it?
too that you've had prenatal visits, you've seen
Exactly.
OB, you likely saw a lactation consultant in the hospital, where we are here. OBs and midwives, they're supposed to be doing breast assessments. Why
Yeah.
does nobody inform these people that IGT is your problem? I've seen women who were struggling with this for months and then came to me and they're like, I just can't figure this out. And then we have to have a very difficult conversation.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking.
Oh, exactly. So, I mean, I've been saying this forever that I don't know why OBs and midwives are not doing breast assessments ahead of time and letting them know. I actually had one client recently who was on her fourth baby, and she finally had a midwife who not before birth, but after birth, once her supply was low, said, I think you have hypoplastic breasts. And I think you need to see an IBCLC. And she was like, well, no wonder. This is my fourth baby and I haven't been able to produce very much milk. And nobody has ever told me that there's something different with my breasts. And I've had a conversation with a midwife about this. And she says, well, I don't do that because you never know. They might be able to produce enough milk. I'm like, you're right. However,
Right.
when you see risk factors, you want to give them the best start possible. And if they pleasantly surprise us and actually do produce enough milk, that's a better way to be wrong.
Right.
You know,
100%.
I mean, and you would never tell somebody you're for sure not going to make enough milk because you don't know. It's not always. But when you can recognize that there isn't sufficient glandular tissue, or there doesn't seem to be, then we need to let the mom know they should schedule a prenatal IBCLC appointment, because there is a lot that you can do prenatally, and things that you should know prenatally based on, also we can go deep into like your history,
Right.
and kind of maybe figure out where it's stemming from and see, what herbs are going to work best for you, and, look into that and see if there's any medications you might need too.
It's also, I think, a very healthy thing to process and
Oh, exactly.
decide how you're going to feel about the likely possibility that supplementation is going to be part of your journey. And
Yeah.
processing that postpartum when you're emotional over breastfeeding not going how you want it to go, and then finding out on top of that I have some sort of biological thing happening in my body that is preventing me from producing enough milk. Combined, when you're in that really hormonal place, that is not the time to learn that information. If we can prevent that from happening, like, we could really prevent a lot of these women from experiencing the emotional turmoil that comes with that process postpartum.
Exactly, completely. And not only that, but they can also get a plan for, okay, supplementation is going to be part of this. How do I want to supplement? Do I want to supplement with formula? Do I want to supplement with donor milk? Do I want to supplement with bank donor milk? Or do I want to try sourcing donors? Because they can start sourcing donors if they want mom to mom milk sharing. And if they have time to do that, it is so much easier for them to not be scrambling when they have a 1 week old where they're like, I don't want to give formula, but I can't find a mom this minute, or I have to drive an hour away to get some milk. And,
Yeah.
and so being able to wrap your mind around it, being able to think about, okay, there's a good chance that supplementation is going to be part of my journey. How do I want to supplement? Also, do I want to supplement at the breast? What are the options for supplementing at the breast? And, you know, all of that stuff, going over that before the baby comes can make a world of difference. It's so hard to even I think it's hard to explain how important a prenatal consult is when it comes to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of the fact that we don't have prenatal consultations is that the OB field is dominated by men and they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't understand. And in the medical community in general, breastfeeding is very much downplayed. And, you know, we've talked a lot about this too, like medical professionals, your doctor, even your pediatrician, they get about 30 minutes total of breastfeeding education their entire medical careers. And it's, you know, when I was taking my nutrition course, there was supposed to be an entire class devoted to breastfeeding, and we got behind. And like my nutrition teacher was like, you know what, we're going to skip the breastfeeding portion and we're going to move on. And like that's the kind of education that our medical providers are getting. And so when it comes to, you know, wanting to establish a really healthy breastfeeding relationship, it's left on these families to seek the support themselves, and most of the time they don't even know where it is, they don't know how to find it, and we're really underserving our people in our community. And I find that the majority of the people who contact us, and I'm wondering if it's the same for you, but the majority of the people who contact us because they want prenatal support, these are not first time parents. These are the second, third, fourth time parents who had a hard time the first time.
Yeah, you know, I get a mixture. I feel like
You definitely get some first time
I
parents. Most
I live in a very forward thinking community and a very holistic minded community. I think that Boulder, Colorado area is a lot different than most areas in the country in a lot of ways.
yes.
And I have a lot of people that, you know, they hear that their friend did a prenatal consult, or their doulas are saying, you know, you really should get a prenatal breastfeeding consult. I've done a lot of talking to the doulas in the community, explaining to them how important it is. And I think that, so I always talk about how I actually think doulas are the front line for who is going to change the world for breastfeeding. Because if we can get doulas to recognize what's normal and get them referring and get them, you know, really, you know, understanding, so many more women are getting doulas now,
Yeah.
you know, because so many women are understanding how important that birth process is, not only physically, but mentally for them. And I think that, you know, it's so a lot of women are taking, you know, all of these classes, you know, like 8 weeks of hour-long Bradley classes or whatnot, but yet think that breastfeeding is just going to be like that, you know,
Yes.
where, you know, it's and then we end up with like pumping long term. And the other thing that I see happening is that they think, well, we have IBC, I'm going to see a lactation consultant in the hospital, and so everything's going to be fine. But what they don't realize is that, number one, they might not see one in the hospital. You know, I have, you know, if they give birth like on a weekend and then they get out the next day, like oftentimes they don't. B, sometimes it's for like 10 minutes. C, they're not going to have any idea how breastfeeding is going when that lactation consultant's in there.
No.
From my own experience, when a lactation consultant, this was before I knew anything about breastfeeding, they came in and they were like, how's it feel? I'm like, I don't know. I remember just being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, does it hurt? I'm like, not really, you know? Um, and they're like, okay. And they left. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to write down when I did which breasts and for how long. And all right, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's it. I mean, and I don't want to go into my whole story, but I ended up having a failure to thrive baby. I didn't, she's like what my whole experience is what motivated me, you know, to become a lactation consultant. But, you know, I didn't get any help. My doctor was like, oh, well, here's formula. I'm like, you won't take a bottle either. What the hell am I supposed to do? And, you know, I got much more help from other moms on the internet And this was 10 years ago. So we didn't have, like Instagram and as much Facebook like we did. It was like baby center groups or something online, but so much more help online than I did from anyone else. Um, and I think that as pregnant mamas, we expect that there is going to be more support for it, you know?
Not.
And there's not.
Or what we find here is that people will go to their pediatrician for support. And what we see a lot of here, and my area is very different than Boulder, Colorado, we see a lot of pediatricians who have, and I'm using very dramatic finger quotes when I say lactation consultants in their office, which is usually, not always, but usually just one of the nurses or a nurse's assistant who took a course on the internet and printed off a certificate. That is not a lactation consultant, but the doctor has labeled them as one, so therefore they are, and then they go get really inadequate support with somebody who doesn't know what's going on, doesn't have the clinical assessment skills, and provides them with a very generic plan for managing lactation, which is very often a triple feeding plan because they don't have skills outside of that, or a nipple shield, which is a whole other soapbox I'm not going to climb on today. And then we get stuck in this trap of, like you were saying earlier, here's your triple feeding plan, be on your merry way with no plan to end it. Mm-hmm. Right? And we see that all the time, and it makes me crazy. Or we'll see lactation consultants in the hospital who go in armed with information to just throw at these parents without really giving them anything that is specific to them in their journey, or really truly evaluating anything, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because they work in a hospital system that doesn't allow them the time and the tools to properly address the concerns that these families are going to have. And there was, 15 births that day, and they're only there for 8 hours, right? So you're thrown, a pile of handouts, a nipple shield, some formula samples, and okay, call us if you need anything, but they don't know what they need. And so our parents are being failed. Our moms are being failed. Breastfeeding is systemically being failed. And it's, horrendously upsetting because I just want to scoop everybody up and tell them, like, the best thing you can do for yourself is arm yourself with the right information and align yourself with the right people. And that's why I love people who come to me prenatally, because I'm like, all right, yes, let's talk about this. And, I just tell them all, you're already like a leap ahead just by coming to me and saying, I want prenatal support.
It also makes your job so much easier, right? I feel like that's, I'm like, oh, I love prenatal clients because we can get our ducks in a row.
Yeah.
It makes my job so much easier.
Even just you don't even have to invest in anything. Just come join us in the Facebook group, find us in the successful breastfeeding community to just hang out and watch, because you're going to then be in the place you need to be to ask the questions you need to ask when you need it, rather than going to Google, which we should just not go there. My story was very similar to yours. I didn't have a baby with failure to thrive. He was very fat, but he was horrible. He was a horrible baby. He was described by everybody as intense, because all he did was scream, because we had an undiagnosed tongue tie, because I was not a lactation consultant when he was born.
That's true.
Yeah. And he was thankfully very fat, because I also had a massive oversupply from all the overstimulation. And I, to this day, have vasospasms from the damage this boy did to me. And thank God I love him and he's cute. But it was my Google spiral that I went on that found the solution that we needed to get to a place where we were thriving, because nobody was helping us either. I was told, one person that we saw told me, the pain you're experiencing is in your head, because his latch looks perfect on the outside. Okay, great.
That's like another post I just posted. Did you see that one?
I didn't see it, but I can already tell you I love it.
About how it doesn't matter what it's like. Yeah, it's like latch is like a pair of stilettos. It really doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside.
Well,
if you can't walk in.
Right, yeah. It's the perfect analogy. That's the perfect.
Right.
Yes, my latch was exactly like the shoes I wore to my husband's cousin's wedding last summer. It was awful.
Yeah, but they looked great, right?
They did, but my lower back was killing me. I had blisters on my toes, and I wanted to cry the whole time.
Yep. Doesn't matter what it looks like.
No, it doesn't, and that is like, oh, okay. I'm not gonna bring nipple shields up again. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. I want to. Yeah, but
No,
it's
but that's actually nipple shields are another reason that moms end up pumping. And
yes,
this we can bring this whole back to, the post-traumatic pumping disorder. But if a mom gets on a nipple shield, there's oftentimes not enough stimulation. So then they have to do insurance pumping.
yep.
And so that's another reason why they end up pumping. And then the next time around, they're like, no pump,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And I mean, and I think a lot of people, when I posted that, laugh about, oh, post-traumatic pumping disorder, haha. But
No,
it's
it's real.
so real for these moms who really experience it. I mean, they have a physical reaction to that. Like, I do not want to touch that to my body again. And then, like you said, that's not just a like psychological, oh, get over it. It's well, the milk won't come out now.
We have to
Because,
recondition you to
yes,
respond to your breast pump and start from scratch. Like we were
right,
literally like treat training this mom with her breast pump. Like, let's get some chocolate, let's get some tea, let's listen
right.
to happy podcasts, let's listen to good music. Let's like not even like, oh, look at a picture of your baby, because I mean, yeah, that can work sometimes, but not when you're having this like big overwhelming issue. We literally just we're gonna just be near your pump and enjoy that experience.
Yeah, I mean, cortisol levels, the stress hormone, they block oxytocin, which is what lets milk out.
Mhm.
And so you have to have a nice association with the pump versus a stressful association with the pump, because we can't have the cortisol blocking the oxytocin.
Yes,
So
yes.
what you did was wonderful, like pairing it with chocolate or anything that she loves,
We use
Uh,
this a lot too with our working parents. We have actually the very first episode of this podcast is a relaxation track for pumping moms that has a bunch of empowering affirmations set to really serene music, just to get them thinking about really positive things, uplifting themselves and reminding them why they're choosing to work so hard and get through this, and like why it's going to be beneficial in the end. And like, it's crazy. We had a mom when we were testing it out to see if it was just a load of crap or actually something that would work. And the first mom that tested it out, she was really struggling to pump. She pumped 6 ounces listening to that track. And that just like
nice.
really, you know, shifted how we were practicing. This was a few years ago. Like, this really shifted how we were practicing when it came to pumping, because we're like, okay, we got to get out of our heads. How do we get out of our heads? We got to think of some psychological tricks. And so anytime we can think of any sort of psychological trick that we can put in our toolbox, we will, because we have to set ourselves up to become friends with our pump, which is what I teach my parents who are going back to work. We're going to make friends with your pump, because these pump breaks need to be something pleasant so that we can avoid this overwhelming gloom and doom experience with the pumping.
Oh, I agree. I mean, that's a great point. Is I talk to parents about, from like the first kid, trying to make pumping a nice experience and how to do that and what they're going to pair it with. Because we should start with that first kid, not making it, a bad experience. So then we prevent the post-traumatic pumping disorder. And you know how every mom that pumps will say that their pump is talking to them,
Yeah.
and like rah, rah, and ends up saying a word. And I always tell them, make sure it's a positive word that your pump is saying to you, or a positive sentence, because I do find that if the pump is saying, like, I don't know what, I can't even think of anything, like shut up, something over and over again, something negative, whatever that
Yeah.
is, or you suck, that
Right.
yeah, that's going to associate, get so many minutes of
Your head.
negative association. But if the pump is cheering for you, like go mama, or whatever,
It's
then
Yeah. No, I hadn't thought of that. That is genius. Okay, so everybody that's listening, when your pump is talking to you, change its dialogue. Hear something else. And
Yes, and you could make it say something else.
yeah, that's wonderful. No, that's a really great trick. Yeah, so for those of you who might be experiencing post-traumatic pump disorder, or if you are expecting again and know that you might have a really negative feeling about pumping, or you're going back to work and you have heard how dreadful pumping can be at work, let's start talking about and open that conversation of how can you make pumping a pleasant experience for yourself? How can we prevent this? And if you're already feeling that dread, let's start working on some psychological tricks now to start creating that positive association with your pump. Let's just hug it and eat some chocolate while you're still pregnant. Just hug it. We're going to love it. And make friends with our pump all over again, because if you need it, it's a really useful tool. And I don't want to see anybody go through that traumatic feeling. And sometimes it's deeper than that. If you feel like you have true trauma from your previous breastfeeding experience, seeking some sort of support for that as well, either with a therapist or a support group may be beneficial for you. But working through those feelings, recognizing those feelings, acknowledging that they're there and that they exist and it's okay that you have them, it can be really empowering as well and help you get to that next phase of actually working past it and creating a positive relationship with your pumping journey again.
That's great. I love how you summed it up.
And with that, I think we'll probably just wrap it up here. This conversation has been amazing. I love this. Some light bulb moments definitely in this episode. So Kelly, thank you so much for your time today and coming here and talking to me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.